The average Australian eats out 3.5 times a month and buys takeaway food 4 times. That's only once a week. I expected more, really, especially here in Melbourne with all our fantastic cafes and restaurants. Show of hands, how many of you ate out or had takeaway this past week? Majority of you. Meet Mr. and Mrs. Lee. It's the weekend, and they're out at St. Kilda Beach with the kids Billy and Mikey. After a fun day of sand and surf, it's sunset. The family decide to get takeaway from a nearby shopping strip. It's nothing fancy, but it is a treat nonetheless. Their meals get served in polypropylene containers like this. Look familiar? Pretty standard stuff. Everybody finishes their meal except for little boy Mikey. So his half-eaten dinner, container and all, gets chucked in the bin, while the other empty containers go to landfill. And with that, the Lee family head home after a great day out. On the other side of town, we have young couple Mel and Josh. It's a Friday night, and they're out at a music festival. The park's chock-a-block with people, and there are food trucks in sight. Plenty of excitement all around. For Mel and Josh, it's a no-brainer to get food from one of the trucks. It would be convenient, and they'd be able to enjoy the music whilst waiting in line. Their meals get served in PLA containers like this. Mel and Josh are told that the containers are biodegradable, which impresses them. They finish their meals and chuck the containers away into a nearby bin, which is overflowing. The containers get swept up and land in the Yarra. However, Mel and Josh don't think twice. They feel good they'd use something biodegradable. Which container do you think is better? PLA or polypropylene? My name is Ruby. I'm an industrial designer and innovator. Grew up in Melbourne and, like most Aussies, tried to do my bit for the environment. I'm going to take you on a journey of what happens to both these containers. Back to the Lee family. Little Mikey's half-eaten takeaway ends up in landfill and just sits there. The food begins to rot and produces methane, a greenhouse gas more potent than carbon dioxide. But the container, well, it just sits there, inert. Doesn't rot or anything. So apart from it being crushed by a compactor every now and then, it remains unchanged for multiple lifetimes. That probably came as no surprise. But how about the other empty containers that were thoughtfully put to recycling? Presumably, they get recycled at a designated facility. Victoria remained Australia's leading plastic recycling state. It's become a universal excuse to say, yeah, it's fine to use this bit of plastic, I'll just chuck it in the recycling bin afterwards. All good, done my bit. But remember that recycling something doesn't mean wiping away its environmental impact. We become over-reliant on a recycling system that is inefficient and incapable of coping. Did you know? According to a study published by the journal Science Advances this year, up until 2015, we humans have produced over 6 billion metric tons of plastic waste globally, and only 9% was recycled. 12% was incinerated, and most of this happened in third world countries. 79% ended up in landfill or the natural environment. 79%. Many first world countries, Australia included, are exporting part of their plastics for processing, where it ends up being incinerated. And you know what happens when plastic is burned? It releases noxious gases. So much for recycling. We need to do better. What about Mel and Josh's PLA containers? Are they any better? Well, in order for a PLA container to effectively biodegrade, it needs to be subject to temperatures of around 60 degrees centigrade for 1 month non-stop. You also need the right moisture levels and a whole bunch of other parameters that coexist only in a man-made environment. So it's a big problem that Mel and Josh's containers ended up in the Yarra. Can we do better? Yes, and I'm here to show you a better way forward. Let me tell you a bit more about myself. I've always liked making things, especially with old bits and bobs. Here's some stuff I made over the years. This is a clock I made from old coffee capsules, a jewellery shoulder piece using parts from a broken printer, and finally, a thingamabob I dreamed up in primary school, dubbed the cappuccino foamer. Quite the budding inventor. Naturally, I ended up studying industrial design. It was there that I learned about upcycling, where in a nutshell, you take something old, discarded, treat it as a raw material, and turn it into something new and useful. Something of arguably greater value. Similar to valorization, it's about appreciating the resources you have to create new products from waste products, and furthermore, make sure that the product decomposes back into the earth as a 100% compostable system. And these systems already exist. In Seoul, South Korea, you can't chuck food waste to landfill, so residents take it to collection points. The food is then put through an organic waste processing machine called a dehydrator, and they are incredibly efficient. Within a matter of hours, large amounts of food waste is turned into a fertilizer of sorts. In Australia, we actually have these machines. They're just not very common yet. Collection of organic waste is not a hurdle either. Next time you go to the supermarket or greengrocers, have a look around and you'll see organic waste bins like this. In Glasgow, Scotland, councils provide households with these waste bins for their food scraps. Meanwhile, in Australia, we have these resources. We need to embrace these resources by making more efficient use of them. In India, there's a tradition of street food vendors serving the customers in little clay pots. Single use. After the customer's done eating, the clay pots are purposely smashed, rehydrated, and reworked to make new ones. Let's not make people change their habits. We love the convenience of takeaway. Let's just do a better job using the waste system we have and substitute the containers we currently use for something that's better. We need an industry that produces readily compostable containers, something you can chuck in the hole in the backyard and not have to worry about. In 2016, I began by creating a compostable biopolymer-based material from scratch. In other words, I needed to use waste products to create a material that would mold like plastic, be strong and durable like plastic, yet break down when necessary. For a single-use item like a takeaway container, it's the perfect package, a balance between functionality and appropriate durability. As the project progressed, I created containers for takeaway food using the material I created from scratch. My product won the 2017 Green Innovators Award at the National Sustainable Living Festival, and it's currently patent pending. I admit, it's pretty exciting. I use existing unappreciated resources like corn husks, the outer green layer surrounding the cob. So much gets thrown out. In fact, corn is one of the most commonly grown crops in the world. The USA alone produced over 3.5 million bushels during the 2015-16 harvest season. And unlike plantations for wood products, you're not using any extra natural resources. My product breaks down within months, even if just buried in the soil. Much like kitchen scraps and compost, no harmful residue, and the broken down components are bioavailable to the environment. That's unlike regular plastics, which just simply break down into ever smaller pieces of plastic. Still remember the Lee family? Little Mikey and his half-eaten takeaway? Dumped to landfill because you don't put food in recycling. Well, just imagine if a compostable, biopolymer-based container was used instead. After the meal, all the containers, food scraps and all, will be collected in an organic waste bin, and the contents put through an organic dehydrator machine. The resulting fertilizer will be used to enrich parks and gardens in the surrounding neighborhoods. Let's catch up with the greenies, Mel and Josh. They still eat at food trucks, but now they opt to use a compostable, biopolymer-based container instead. The container still ends up in the yarrow, but this time, there are no harmful components. This is not a dream. This can be reality now. The product exists, the bins exist, the technology exists. I had my product tested in a dehydrator machine right here in Melbourne, the same ones being used in Korea. I was able to successfully demonstrate that my product readily breaks down. But you see the regular plastic in the red bucket? It still remains. You don't have to give up eating takeaway. You don't have to feel guilty about boxing home or unfinished dinner. By substituting in a compostable, biopolymer-based container in situations where regular plastics are used, and by embracing efficient waste systems with waste dehydration technologies, we have the potential to save the lives of both marine and land animals whilst reducing the amount of regular plastic that lingers around in our ecosystem. Together, we can create a better future. Thank you.